also related to the informal economy around the anthropology of money in the informal sector or the informal economy, as it may. So Dr. Edson is completing his PhD at the University of Pretoria and is working more broadly on the anthropology of money and everyday life. Of course, and how that's linked to protracted socio-economic and political crisis. So without further ado, let me give Dr. Edson the opportunity to start the presentation.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Doc. Thank you, everyone, for attending this seminar. My research focus is explained by Dr. Gukurume. I focus more on money, informality, and anthropology. So in those spaces, I went to Zimbabwe to do data collection in June 2022. So when I was in Zimbabwe doing data collection, it was just a year before elections, and the following year, 2023, there were elections. So during my field work, I was interacting with different people, but the majority of the people who were in the streets were these hustlers who call themselves Mungwavhi Wanhasi. Mungwavhi Wanhasi, it's like a hustler of today. So I then called them contemporary hustlers. So interacting with these people, I wanted to understand that, okay, these people are more into this space, which I feel it's a temporality, it's a space which they get in because of hardships and they wish for a better tomorrow. So the question was, okay, so I had read a Guy Standing's theory of on precarity, where he was saying that these youths, they are potentially a revolutionary rising class. So as a potentially revolutionizing class, he was arguing that, okay, there will come a time where these youth will revolt against the systems and overthrow the government, or they are a danger to the status quo. So from that understanding, I then started to ask myself that, okay, with the way in which these youths in the streets of Harare, where I was conducting my data collection, with the way in which they are understanding their position, with the way in which they try to foresee the future, with the way in which they understand politics, to what extent are they really a threat to the status quo? Those were the questions which were coming to me, especially following commentary like many people were saying there is a good number of youthful voters in Zimbabwe. Therefore, this coming election, there is likely to be change. So as I was interacting with these people, trying to understand how do they do their things, how do they understand their position, is it a temporality or it's something that they feel like it's a safer space for them? It made me to then probe into issues of how they understand politics as a group. So from the basic understanding was uncertainty is now a common feature everywhere. In the modern world, where even people in the West or in Europe, they are faced with these situations. If you read Guy Standing, he wrote a book, Strangers at the Door. In that book, Strangers at the Door, he was arguing that people even in Europe are feeling that their futures are not certain, and they understand that this is being also worsened by people who are migrating to their areas. So Guy Standing, when he was seeing this group, he was saying, when he was seeing youth, especially youth, considering that this group is the group which is much affected by the continuous economic and political challenges which are being faced all over. He was saying, okay, so if we are to look backward, we can see that the working class were the ones who were supposed to lead that revolution there, and during Marx's time, and according to Marx theorizing. Then he was saying, okay, then the group which is facing many challenges this time around is this youthful, this precariat group, which is composed mainly of youth. He then said, okay, it is a potential of leading to a revolution. Then in his theorizing, I argue that he was focusing more on the youth in Europe who can freely participate in politics, where there is some level of democracy. I'm not saying that there is a perfect democracy, but I'm trying to compare with the African spaces, not universalizing African spaces, but with a special focus on the Zimbabwean case, which I'm focusing on. So looking in Africa, I saw that the majority of youth, for sure, they fit within the definition which Guy Standing gave on the precariat, where he said, okay, these they lack opportunities, they lack especially opportunities to improve their lives. So in questioning this, I was conducting my ethnographic study in Zimbabwe, then questioning these and interacting with youth from different backgrounds. So during my ethnographic fieldwork, I managed to get into Mungwavhi Wanhasi's everyday life. I used the title Mungwavhi Wanhasi using a singular term which they used to refer to each other. These youths which I was interacting with, you would find them others wearing T-shirts written Mungwavhi Wanhasi, showing how they celebrate their place in the hustling space in the streets. These youths, most of them, they have never worked. After completing their degrees, they just got into, some have formal education and some do not have. After completing their degrees or their high school education, they got into the streets to start hustle. The hustles, they include especially exchanging money with anyone doing anything else, but you would find that person also exchanging money, which is the space which I was mainly focusing on, the exchange of money. So I'm not saying every youth in the street is actually exchanging money, but every youth in the street, I argue that you may find them understanding the deals in money exchange and also trying to take value from that space. So they call their economic activities Mungwavhi Wanhasi, which is in line with the name that they gave themselves. Mungwavhi Wanhasi, it's basically hustling. But the hustling, they will be trying to show that there is need for cleverness, there is need for dodging the systems within that space. So I conducted my ethnographic in an environment which I personally can relate, considering that I'm also a youth in Zimbabwe and that I lived in Harare for quite a long time, let us say since 2015, I was staying in Harare, seeing these people in these streets every day, which to some extent may also affect my understanding of the space or may lead me to generalize some of the things. So I have a theoretical background from the human economy, which I'm a fellow. So in the human economy, we focus on what do people do every day for themselves, and how do they live? How do they respond to systems? How do they respond to structures which shape their everyday life? So from this background, I was interacting with these youth, trying to understand what is it that they do? How are they relating to the political systems? How are the political systems shaping their ways of life? How are they interacting with the police? How are they interacting with money? How are they interacting with people back home? And how do they want people to understand them? So I was trying to understand them from their perspective. That is mainly the reason why I called them Mungwavhi Wanhasi, which is a name that they give themselves. The precariatness, it is my bias as a researcher that, okay, I felt that this position is a position of precarity, considering the description which Guy Standing was using in explaining precariousness. So I interacted with this Mungwavhi Wanhasi in the space of money changing, in phone repair, in everyday buying and selling, in their spaces of entertainment, trying to understand how do they relate with each other in all these spaces. So I want to take you through a life of one of my participants, whom I call Tinashe, which is a pseudonym, of course. I interacted with Tinashe, who is around 26, 27 now. He has a degree, and I have never got a job since he finished his degree. He was never called for an interview. So basically, he gave up on the issue of looking for a job. He just understand that, okay, he no longer need to have a CV. He no longer need to keep applying, but he has to wake up, go into the street, look for opportunities in those streets, and try to find what can help him to put food on the table. That is how they used to put it. Every youth would say, we are now focusing on putting food on the table, because there are no other opportunities which are there for us, which we may try to look for jobs, but they're not there. So we are now focusing on putting food on the table. Then if it happens that we get more than that, we can also try to even establish and do other things. So Tinashe lives in Budiriro, a high density suburb in Harare, where rents are cheaper, because but even with these cheaper rents, he still struggles to pay rent. His parents who are in the rural areas, they even send him money for rent and for food. He hustles in town and to town where he hustles. I used to discuss with him. He calls the play when he's waking up, he wakes up and tries and goes to Kubasa. He goes to work. He calls that work. He has internalized it as work, and he understands that this is my work. This is what I do for a living. So at every time when you're interacting with them, you see that they understand that we wake up, we go to work, and they spend their day in the street where they'll be doing informal money exchanging, buying stolen phones and selling, fixing phones. Although they are not good, in most of the cases, they just they will be in the street advertising that they fix phones. Then a client may come to him, give him a phone, then he go and look for someone. He knows people who can fix phones. Then you go and negotiate, and they say, okay, can you fix this phone for me, maybe for $10? Then you go and charges the client maybe $15, something like that. That is how they are doing their everyday dealings. So Tinashe and friends in the hustling network, they always try to portray, that is the portrayed lifestyles. After this struggle, they then try to portray as if they are riding high, or as if they are not struggling, as if they are making it. So you'd find out that in most of the cases, you would find these youths are wearing fake Gucci's, fake Versace's, fake Nike shoes, as they will be trying to show that, okay, in this space we are doing well. But if you are, all right, I'll go back to Guy Standing at some point to discuss with him. So by buying these fake clothing labels and secondhand phones or imitations, we can take, for example, you find them holding an iPhone 15 Pro. Then if you have to switch it on and try to look at the phone, you understand that this is a fake product. So they usually spend much of the monies they have worked for the whole week in their partying life, especially on weekends, because they want to then go and party with girls, taking pictures to upload on social media and WhatsApp status. In these spaces, they will be portraying as if they are riding high, imitating lifestyles of elite guys, like wearing those Versace, trying to be also pouring champagnes or beers on their fake wristwatches. So this has resulted in them being referred by many commentators as unfocused youths, especially by one of the prominent journalists in Zimbabwe, Hope watching on. He calls these youths unfocused youths because from his understanding, he thinks that, okay, considering that these youths are the ones who are really suffering from the situation which is happening in Zimbabwe, so he expects them to be angry about the system, to be trying at every time to do away with the system. But these youth, they are instead focusing on just their hustle. After focusing on their hustle, they then go into the partying lives. So instead, these unfocused youths like Tinashe and his friends, they do not engage much in politics. They do only if they see an immediate benefit, which made them to be aligned, especially to ZANU-PF politics. So instead of them being a threat to the system, they are they are now trying to find immediate benefits from this system. So the making of this Mungwavhi Wanhasi, or this participation in PROS-MPF, is a thing that can be traced in Mugabe's political violence legacy, where in many cases parents want their children not to participate in politics, because they usually tell children that you die for nothing. Monofira mahara, it's a common narrative in Zimbabwean spaces when it comes to issues to do with politics. You'd find parents used to tell children that you die for nothing. A thing which Tinashe was continually referring to in our interaction. He says, at every time when I have a call with my parents, especially as we are heading towards elections, during the time when I was interacting with him, it was late 2022 and early 2023, 2023 being the year of elections. He used to say that my parents, when they call me, they remind me that I should not participate in politics because I will die for nothing. They have many cases of people who died during the 2008 elections. So the parents were further emphasizing that, please, we do not want to lose you. It is better for us to have you, regardless of you struggling, but we'll be having you, than for you to be killed in these political spaces. So instead of him trying to confront the system, these Tinashe and his friends, they always try to forge networks with these elites and politicians to avoid being arrested in their spaces, considering that there are a lot of illegalities that they are doing. The money changing on its own is an illegal practice. The vending, the spaces, the vending, they do it in the spaces which are not legal. So them doing the vending in the spaces which are not legal, they always try to find a way to be protected by these elites and politicians, who will then always go and talk to the police if they get arrested. So in most of the cases, they try to show these political leaders or these elites that, okay, we are not a threat to your position. Instead, we can work for you. You can give us the way in which they interact with these elites. It is a way which shows respect, which shows admiration, and which shows that we are not a threat to your position. Instead, we want to be assimilated into the system. So, what is my argument? Therefore, I therefore argue that the precariat in Zimbabwe is not a revolutionary class, is proposed by Guy Standing in his understanding of the precariat. He was arguing that the precariat is a dangerous class, a revolutionary class, but with the practices and everyday interaction with the political system, which Tinashe and friends do on their everyday life, they show that they are not necessarily a threat to the system, but rather they are necessitating the sustenance of the system, of the status quo. So instead, I argue that instead of these youths being a danger to the society, or being a danger to the status quo, or a danger to the elite, they are rather a danger to the society, in the sense that they are inhibiting change. Because people expect these youths to be participating in leading to change, but rather they are focusing on trying to be assimilated or to be accommodated in the status quo. So the system which is producing the precariat will survive because the precariat is, in this case, do not see any way out, which has resulted in youths like Tinashe turning their backs on the idea of changing the situation, and rather they focus on how can they be incorporated into the system. So in discussion with Guy Standing, again, I show that, okay, the system in Europe is a little bit different, not a little bit, but different with the case here in Africa, where political participation, in most of the cases, youths shun political participation. If the youths in Zimbabwe are not shunning, their parents, they're encouraging them not to participate in politics. So instead, they are rather entirely losing interest in politics of change, but they are focusing on politics of immediate benefit. So this is basically the research that I wanted to share with you. I think we can engage more through a discussion. Any questions? And maybe over to you, Doc, for chairing the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eddie, for that interesting presentation on the youth and how the youth have become a very precarious group. And I think this resonates not only in Africa, but like you rightfully highlighted, that it's a growing global concern where, because of rising unemployment, we are beginning to see young people becoming more and more precarious and also leading very precarious lives. But at the same time, we are also seeing very interesting, creative ways of connecting themselves to global circuits of consumption. Like what you highlighted, that we see the emergence of fakes in terms of counterfeit products being consumed and circulated globally. And I think China has a significant role in the production and reproduction, as well as circulation of such counterfeit products that young people then consume for them to really project a very kind of staged presentation of the self, maybe something that is very much linked to their aspirations and the kind of lifestyle that they aspire to, and the kind of subjectivities that they try to create in terms of their identity. So that's a very interesting presentation. Maybe let me open it up. Are there any questions that you would want to ask, or are there any comments for Dr. Eddie on his presentation on contemporary hustlers and youth subjectivities in Zimbabwe's informal economy? I'm sure there should be some questions, but maybe as we wait, maybe I can start with my own my own question. I just wanted your thinking around how protracted economic crisis tend to collapse the formal and the informal, especially when you look at the Zimbabwean economy. In as much as these young people that are transacting and converting currencies in the streets of the capital city, Harare, in as much as they are regarded as informal, but you'd actually see that some of them are actually agents, or they are the middlemen who are working for formalized organizations like businesses that would want foreign currency for them to go and purchase goods that they would resell back in the country, where maybe they go and buy in Botswana, in South Africa, or other countries, for instance. And at the same time, sometimes they are also acting on behalf of politicians. So in as much as this is informal, we also see elements of formality in terms of how the processes are done. So I just wanted your reflection on how periods of protracted economic crisis may tend to collapse the formal and the informal.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Doc. I think to a higher degree, this period of protracted economic crisis has resulted in a situation where the line between formal and informal economy has continually become blurred. This is mainly seen in how the activities in the informal economy are linked with the activities which are in the formal economy. So, for example, to a higher degree, there are players which are in the formal economy who have access to cash. Then the players in the informal economy, they are the ones who are then doing the money exchange. So for the people in the formal economy to be able to access the streets, they take cash from their systems, which is the formal economy. For example, people who work in the passport offices, people who work in formal shops where customers can pay with cash. They always try to find a way to take cash from their system and then try to find a way of exchanging it for a premium in the streets. How is that possible? Why selling cash? The challenge in Zimbabwe is that there is cash shortage. Therefore, it is difficult for people who have digital money to convert their digital to cash. This has resulted in a situation where cash has a higher value. There is an informal hierarchization of money, where we have USDs at the top, we have cash, Zimbabwean dollars cash, then we have digitals, different digitals, bank digitals, mobile money. So people who are working in the formal economy, they have systems to force people to come with money, for example. But for them to make a killing out of that, they can only link themselves or find runners. There's a runner phenomenon which is continually developing in the Zimbabwean economic space, where those guys in the streets, they are in many cases running front, to put it that way, the runner phenomenon, where they are doing these businesses for people in the formal economy, for the elites, for the politicians, who understand that it is not ideal for them to be seen standing in the streets exchanging money. We can take, for example, a bank manager may have access to cash, but a normal person, when they want to go and withdraw, there's a daily limit. But a person may be having challenges, like they want to pay for bus fare. There's no other way of paying for bus fare other than using cash in Zimbabwe, considering the systems. So you would find out that that person who withdrew according to the limits, who withdrew maybe 30,000, but he actually needs maybe 100,000. So the remaining 70,000, the only way out will be to buy that cash from the streets. The bank manager, who is a very formal person, he has access to that cash, and he understands that everyone everywhere, the Zimbabwean system is corrupt. Everyone everywhere is making money from where they are. So they then try to find a way to put the money in the streets, which is usually through the runner. Those guys like Tinashe, whom I was talking about, they try to be to have a good relationship with those people, so that they have access, or they have float, the way they put it. They have access to cash, which they will then sell for USDs, and they will be in that game of money changing, for example. So to a higher degree, I agree with you on the continuous merging of these economies, to the extent that you cannot differentiate between formal and informal economy. Thank you. I do not know if it sounds.
Yeah. Let me open it up. I don't know if there are any questions or comments from those online based on the presentation by Dr. Edson. Are there any questions, any comments that you would want to share? I'm sure there are some people with either questions or comments. Feel free to ask if you have any questions or comments. Maybe as we wait, the class that I'm teaching for my postgraduate is on methods, and of course theory, I think, is also important. So I don't know if you can speak a little bit about your methodology and your methods. And maybe also a little bit about the theory. I heard you speak about Guy Standing's conceptual analysis around the precariat and precariousness. Maybe as we give those that may have questions to frame their questions, maybe you can speak a little bit about your methods, and maybe also challenges that you tend to find in the field when you do the actual field work. I know in some cases, when you are writing your proposal, you have a clearly laid out methodology and methods that I want to do focus group discussions. I want to do participant observation, I want to do this, but then the reality that you find in the field might be fundamentally different. Maybe you can also speak about if there are any changes or any creativity that you had to come up with in terms of adapting some of your methods and stuff like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. The methodology component of my research was, it was a little bit challenging. Item number one, because of the politics of money changing in Zimbabwe. It is a thing which is happening every day. And as I have mentioned, there is an involvement of elites. So it is a politically charged space. It is an informal space which the state is always trying to get rid of. But big players like politicians and elites, they are also participating in that space. So it is a politically charged space where conducting data collection in such a space, it poses a lot of challenges. So to get rid of this, yes, I explained to a lot of people that I interacted with. I would go introduce myself as Edson Chiwenga. Yeah, it is another issue which also worked, I think, for me and to some extent against me. As Edson Chiwenga, then they will say, okay, Edson Chiwenga, then the vice president of Zimbabwe, who is also infamously known for being among the ringleaders of violence in the political space, is Chiwenga. Then I would come to the money changers and say, I'm Chiwenga. Others would then, okay, we are interacting with the general, then they'll be comfortable to talk to you. Others would say, okay, then how do we know that we are not connected to that? How do we know that you will not sell us, to put it in their way? How do we know that you are not going to sell us? Like selling, like how do we know that you are not going to snitch, that this is what we are doing? Also, the space in the presentation after such, I promised them that I will use pseudonyms in my presentation of findings, a thing which I'm doing. I think I told you that Tinashe, and I told you that it's a pseudonym in the presentation. So that is the other way and challenge. The other advantage which I got is being a youth in Zimbabwe, conducting field work in that space. The language which is used in that space of money changing and in the informal space is fast to some extent, is not the formal language or the everyday language. So I had an advantage that it is a language which was which developed during also my time. The people who were in the streets, we could understand each other even if they are using their street language. Then on the participant side, it was really complicated every time, because there are some times where you feel that it's better for me to go and hold money like other money changers so that I can observe and understand. And then you would find that this is an illegal space and police would come. Then you had to try and explain that I'm a researcher, and then the question is, okay, when you are saying that you are a researcher, do you have an ethics clearance? Then all those things. So I argue that, number one, a person has to look into the politics of the space that one is researching on and try to strike a balance. All researches, I believe, they are subjective to those experiences of the field. Number two, I feel as anthropologists, it is important to a higher degree to have some understanding of the language, the ways, the meanings of the ways that the meanings that participants attach to their actions. A thing which was easier for me, considering that I was one of them, as they understood me on the everyday. So yeah, to a higher degree, there were quite a number of challenges, which include politics, the nature of the space in which I was researching, the language which they use. They use this language not necessarily to make you not understand, but it's a language to do their deals in a quicker way. Like, you cannot explain that I have rands which I want to exchange to this. It will be a longer story. So they have their quick codes which they use to communicate in that space. So the understanding of those codes was also important in positioning me for that research. So
Okay.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that was the methodological journey. Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that. I don't know if there are any people that have maybe come up with any questions or any comments. Yes, Melanie, I see your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Good day, sir. I have a question. So I understand that when someone is conducting a research, they always want to come up with solutions to the problem or whatever they saw in that environment. So I wanted to ask, sir, what are your solutions from whatever you observed in that environment?
Okay, thank you, Melanie. The problem within the Zimbabwean political space requires, yes, I tried other solutions, like there is need for real opposition politics which come up with clear strategies. But what I think is the solution to the current Zimbabwean situation is to a higher degree an intervention. Let us consider that this situation which is in Zimbabwe today happened around 2008, where the inflation reached its peak in 2008. And the solution to that was when Thabo Mbeki went and negotiated what they called talks, and they came up with a government of national unity. Things stabilized in Zimbabwe after that. But I feel like the solution which they proffered was just short-lived. I think there is need for that system again to be tried and put in place transitional structures, which may give, for example, let's say 10 years, and in those 10 years, we'll talk about the issues to do with constitution. Then there are also other hidden spaces, like there is also need for a cultural change. There will be also need to then talk to these people who I argue they are now highly unemployable. They are now basically hustlers who are unemployable. They are now too streety to be employed, a majority of them. So there is need for a cultural revamp. I don't know how can that happen. It's an ideological thing. But those two, I think there's need for an international intervention, just like what happened in 2008 in Zimbabwe. But then after that, there is need for that cultural reorientation, to put it that way.
Yeah, thank you, Melania, for that interesting question. And I think I just want to extend that as well, to say, when you look at the young people that are surviving in the streets through everyday hustling, including the trading of foreign currency, which they refer to as very lucrative. And I remember back then when, of course, we were going to university, and some of our age mates transacting in the streets and making a lot of money, and even going to an extent of mocking those that are going to get degrees, that you are going to get degrees, and then when you get degrees, you will not even get the amount of money that they were making on a monthly basis. Do you think that it's going to be possible for these hustlers to really warm up to formal kind of employment? Because in most cases, hustling, not only in Zimbabwe, but in many other African countries, hustling in the streets or in the informal economy is actually seen to be more lucrative than getting a formal job, because you make quick buck, and in most cases, it's very flexible. You are not required to go maybe from 8 to 5 kind of work or office work, which I think is a fundamental challenge that we might have in many African countries, where hustling is highly regarded and highly lucrative as compared to formal employment.
Yeah, thank you, Doc, for that addition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions or comments on on the presentation. I think we still have about 12 minutes, and then you guys would be free to go.
Maybe I can add another ethical dilemma that I faced.
Yeah.
Going with
Yeah.
in consent form to give to a participant who is in that space of money changing.
Yeah.
Was another thing which proved not to be ideal considering the type of participants that I was dealing with. Let us consider that this person is in a space which is illegal, and you then go with a form and you say, okay, sign that you are participating in this and sign that you have. It's a thing which was, I tried it, but I felt that it was counterproductive. And a lot of people would see it as an admission of guilty. So instead of going to the streets with papers, I considered that I will go to the street, I will talk to these money changers, I will explain them my position, what I'm looking for, and seek for consent before observing whatever that they are doing, but doing it without the informed consent form. Considering that with the informed consent form, you are giving someone who is doing something illegal, and then you are involving a document. So those were other challenges and how I try to get around them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I think it's something that is definitely helpful for those that would want to do research, where like documentation may become very suspicious for some participants, especially in maybe spaces where it's precarious for people to sign paperwork, and maybe in studies where maybe things that are being done there are maybe illegal or maybe informal, that could be policed. It then becomes extremely difficult for you to get maybe informed consent that is signed, where people consent to say, okay, we want to participate in this. So I think like what you highlighted there, maybe verbal consent becomes an alternative where you just agree with your participants that you are going to observe what they are doing, that they are agreeing to you, interviewing them. And so I think that is part of the creativity that is needed when you are in the field. So sometimes you are forced by the circumstances to adapt some of the methodologies and techniques that you might use in collecting data. For instance, maybe probably one might want to do a focus group discussion, but then realize that it's not possible for one to do a focus group discussion. Or maybe you were not preparing to do a focus group discussion, but then you realize that maybe these young people, when they are trading and transacting in the streets, they are always in maybe smaller groups of 3, 4, 5. You ask one person and both of them are interested in responding. So it becomes a quasi focus group discussion, even though maybe before the field work, you never anticipated that you wanted to do, or that you were going to do focus group discussions. You end up doing focus group discussions. So I think that is part of the dynamics of the field when you go in to do your data collection. And I think, Eddie, your work seems to be building on scholars like Jeremy Jones' ideas around the kukiakia economy. How do you think this idea of kungwavangwava or hustling, how do you think maybe it speaks to or maybe expand Jeremy Jones' work on the kukiakia economy? If you might want to comment on that.
Yeah. To a higher degree, my work, I feel it builds on Jeremy Jones' kukiakia space. But players which were in Jeremy Jones' space, they understood that in as much as what they are doing may be illegal, they couldn't go to an extreme. The Mungwavhi, Kungwava, one of my participants took time to try and define the word for me. He said Kungwava, it's from Kungwara, being clever, and Wumbava, than stealing. So with Jeremy Jones' area, people were basically trying to hustle from a position which, to some extent, I had some sense of morality. But in the Mungwavhi, I argue that there is a strong destruction of a society to a higher degree, where people, one of my participants said, even if my dad come to the streets trying to exchange money, I'll treat him as a customer, not as my father. I'll make sure that I maximize. So they were trying to show how they became those like utility maximizers. And unlike the Jeremy Jones people were more of, I feel they were more of people who were trying to find a livelihood. So in as much as I'm saying with time, this is how Zimbabweans are being transformed. That is where I say I'm building on Jeremy Jones. They were during that time around 2000, they were still a little bit humane, but they are now market-driven individuals who are now focusing on utility maximization. During the Bukiakia time, yes, I'm not arguing that there are no relations which are there, but to a higher degree, at the level of utility maximization, which is now in the street, is a little bit different from during the time of Jeremy Jones' field work. That is what I think. I don't know, you were in the field during Jeremy Jones' time, and you understand the field that I conducted data collection. What's your take about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, and I'm sure there are some kind of interface in the whole idea of hustling, although maybe now there are more people that are hustling, so it has become like a dog eating phenomenon, where it's becoming more competitive. There's cutting edge competition because of increasing unemployment. I think if unemployment was maybe 80% in 2018, 2010, now I think because of the protractedness of the economic crisis, it could be probably close to maybe 90%, if not more than that. And that makes many of these young people then enter into the informal economy, and as a result, adding to the competition that is there. Probably that's why they are now operating within the logics of having to maximize at each and every deal that they find themselves in. Yes, I see, Doc, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I've learned a lot, and from the presentation, I think I've learned that Mungwavhi is a form of refusal politics that probably shows the political function of vulnerability. However, I'm interested in knowing from the researcher if the hustlers actually think of their lifestyle, fake as it is, as precarious. If they don't, would you probably suggest that the meaning of precarity might need to be seen as maybe context specific or space bound?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Doc. Traditionally, many scholars, they usually see players in the informal economy using a lens of some element of temporality, to put it that way. But with the players that I interacted with in Zimbabwe, temporality, which is another feature of precarity anyway. Anyone who is in that precarious space, they feel that it's a temporality, everything that we are doing here. But with the players that I worked with, I saw that I feel like it's something which is their permanent way of life, with some managing to buy residential stands and starting building. They do not necessarily see their space as a precarious space. They even try to show that a mastery of their skills of hustling, it is a new requirement of the permanent feature which is now in Zimbabwe, that instead Zimbabweans need to master that Mungwavhi economic skills, something like that. So to a higher degree, they don't see it like precarity. They do not see a lot of it as a temporality. They feel like this is now the way of life. I do not know if I responded to your question, Doc.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you have sufficiently answered my question. So what it implies, therefore, is that precarity ought to be understood maybe differently depending on where we are.
Yes. Yeah, to a higher degree, I argued, I think, that I said they themselves, they do not see themselves using this lens of precarity. It is my bias as a researcher. I want to argue that. They call themselves Mungwavhi Wanhasi, a name which they take pride of. They do not see the things that we are seeing. I see a fake Versace, but they feel like they are making it. That is what they say. They are very much concerned in making it, buying his Wonder Fit, also having a beautiful girlfriend if they are still young, or having a family and a small house if they are at some stage, then going to buying a stand and delaying to come to the streets, saying, I passed it through my stand. The way they celebrate, rather they kind of celebrate being in that space. That is what I saw.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting observation, which resonates to some extent with emerging youth subjectivities in many African countries. And I think in South Africa we have what is called is the Kotane, where young people literally burn stuff, expensive stuff. I don't know if there's anyone who knows is Kotane, and anyone who might want to maybe in a couple of minutes to share what is Kotane mean, or what practices those young people do, which is referred to as is Kotane. I think it's something that is very much interesting in terms of lifestyle, but also even in terms of youth popular culture and youth identities and subjectivities. Anyone online who might want to tell us what they know about this Kotane? I'm sure you maybe one or two of you guys would probably know this kind of practice where young people burn some expensive clothes, sometimes even burning money and stuff like that, as a way of, to some extent, it's a way of revolting against the state, but at the same time, it's also a way of celebrating new and emergent forms of identities, but also a way of asserting certain forms of being, which are of course linked to upward mobility, where young people feel like they've made it in life. And when you look at this in the streets of many countries, including even countries such as the Republic of Congo, we have got what are called the laissez-faire, these people that import designer suits and designer clothes from France mainly, and from Italy. They wear shoes from Italy, they wear designer suits from France, but they are walking in the streets which are linked with poverty. Which is an irony, but it speaks to very interesting dynamics. Yes, Aluta, I see your hand. Go ahead.
So I want to give the explanation on Kotane.
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you very much.
They are the street crews. They are the street crews now. They fight each other through outlandish displays on fashion, dances, and they use this as an idea of showing wealth and swag, and also to gain respect in the community. Yes, but they also make other young men, young guys to think that being involved in this cruise is a well-off thing. Yes.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Aluta, for explaining that. And I think it's an interesting, maybe some of you guys are going to be doing research when you are in your third year or when you are doing your honors. And I think it's an interesting area of research where it sort of become part of a cult in a group of young people that, you know, celebrates these kind of subjectivities where, for instance, they realize that the only way for you to gain respectability in your society is through conspicuous consumption, of course, not knowing where this money is coming from, but they view it as a way of gaining some kind of respectability or being hyper visible. In most cases, what these young people do is try to be hyper visible because they've realized that you become invisibilized as a young person because maybe you're unemployed. So they find other ways of becoming visible, or what some people would say, other ways of asserting their masculinities. So it can be through violence, it can be through conspicuous consumption, it can be through many other ways that they become visible or they gain respectability. Being, you know, swaggy, like what Aluta is highlighted there, that, you know, they become the center of attraction in the community because of the swag, because of burning money, because of fighting, the battles through who is better dressed than others. So it's an interesting area of research. And I think it speaks to or relates to what Dr. Edson is presented on, how young people are recalibrating their subjectivities and identities through all these kind of activities that you find in the streets. So the street becomes a precarious space, but at the same time, it also becomes a space of creativity, a space of innovation, and even a space of upward mobility, a space of opportunity for other people to become hyper visible. And I remember, I think maybe my last point, Dr. Edson, in the last election, when the current president of Zimbabwe was elected, there was one of these young people that were in the streets who shot a video which went viral, celebrating that, you know, we now have another 5 years of making money. And they were celebrating, and I think that really speaks to the conclusion that you make, that the urban precariat, especially the youth precariat in the streets of Harare, are not necessarily a threat to the status quo, but actually play an important role in the reproduction of the status quo because they celebrate that uncertainty, that crisis, that economic crisis, because they are benefiting from that economic crisis through the everyday forms of hustles and the opportunities that that economic uncertainty and crisis produces for them. That's why I was saying, can we really probably see these young people as young people who would go back into formal economy or into formal employment when maybe things normalize, or they would want to rather see the continuation of that crisis and that uncertainty because they are benefiting from such kind of politics. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if maybe your last word on that. That would be the last, I think, for today.
Okay, Doc, from my end, I think I do not have anything else to say. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Edson, for sharing your insights and very interesting research that you are doing. And my hope is, like some of my students and colleagues that are here can also see some of the potential areas that they can work on in terms of their presentations and some of the things that, you know, people encounter when conducting research and doing field work, and the methods that are used and the conceptual and analytical frameworks that people can use whenever they are doing their research. But most importantly, also the similarities and differences between what is happening in other countries and what is happening in South Africa. So next week, we are also going to have another interesting presentation by Dr. Hannah Dawson, which I think very much relates to what Dr. Edson presented today. So I'm hopeful that you guys are going to join us next Tuesday as well to listen to Dr. Hannah Dawson's work on the informal economy as well, but within the context of South Africa, in Zandspruit, one of the townships in South Africa. So thank you very much for attending. I know that you guys were supposed to be having your recess, but you sacrificed to attend, and I really appreciate you attending the seminar series, and hopefully you are getting maybe one or two things that would be helpful for some of your future work and some of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much, Dr. Edson, and everyone who attended. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we're looking forward to seeing you next week, next Tuesday, or for another interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.